Welcome to Public Affairs on AWI TV. Well, I'm here in Arlington, Virginia, and I'm at the National Science Foundation. This is an independent federal agency that provides research and educational opportunities or support to all the thousands of colleges and universities across the country, the whole nation, in the field of science and engineering. I'll be talking to the Deputy Assistant Director of the Geoscience Directorate right here at the NSF building. Welcome to Dr. Teofilo Abrajano, Jr. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'd like to request you to please inform our audience exactly what the activity of the NSF is and what is your role in the Geoscience Directorate.
Thank you. The National Science Foundation supports all basic research conducted by universities and other eligible researchers in the U.S. And it covers every field of science with the possible exception of a research that's being done, for example, at the National Institute of Health. But all basic science is being supported by the National Science Foundation. And within it, there are multiple directorates. And you have math, physics, chemistry, you have engineering, you have geosciences, which is the directorate that I am helping look after. The Geoscience Directorate has ocean sciences, earth sciences, atmospheric sciences, and polar programs, a total portfolio of about $1.4 billion a year.
As I understand, the budget last year was $7 billion. Now, with the economic situation of the United States, of the country, how will this impact the granting of scholarships and a lot of the support for research and also for the many different projects that you will be undertaking this year? And what will be the priorities?
Of course, the fiscal situation of the U.S. is difficult at the moment, and we do not expect substantial growth in funding of the National Science Foundation. However, $7 billion is a lot of money, and it is able to support a lot of research. It is able to support a lot of students. And perhaps the major impact is there will not be a lot of growth. Nevertheless, we are still able to sustain and support some outstanding research and outstanding students.
Mm-hmm. I know that you are very much involved in the activities in the United States. What about the partnership with other federal agencies and also the other countries around the world?
It is part of the normal operation of the National Science Foundation to leverage the investments that we're doing in basic science in areas that have kind of overlap with other mission agencies. For example, here in the Geosciences, we have a lot of investments overlapping with the U.S. Geological Survey. We do a lot of collaborations with them. We support earthquake research, volcano research with the U.S. Geological Survey. The USDA, the agency of government that looks after agriculture, looks after soil. We do have tremendous collaborations. We co-invest in research together. Internationally, we have the Office of International Science and Engineering here, and we invest in collaborative programs. We support U.S. researchers to go and explore and do some work with partners. And very recently, we have instituted this peer program, which is we invest on our researchers, and the USAID supplies support for the partner foreign countries, and they conduct research in the Philippines, in Indonesia, in Africa, and all over the world.
And how competitive are these scholarships? I wonder if you could give some advice to those people who are watching today, Public Affairs, on how they can make a proposal so much more attractive to the NSF.
Well, scholarships for students really rely heavily on the performance and grades and recommendations that the students get coming in here for these scholarships. It is extremely competitive. Just to kind of give you a glimpse of how competitive it is, the grants that we have given to students in the past, many of the students have ultimately became members of the National Academy. These are highly competitive, and the advice I can give to any student who would like to avail of this is to take care of your school. Do good, get some great grades, apply your knowledge, and make sure that you will get excellent recommendations from your professors when you apply.
I guess just follow the footsteps of Dr. Abrajano here. He was once upon a time also a young student that went to a science high school and did your dissertation finally, and now you're with the government. They'll give us a brief success story.
Well, I wouldn't quite, obviously it's kind of difficult to describe one's own background as a success story. All I can tell you is that growing up where I grew up in the Philippines, in Pag-asa, and not having much when I was a young man growing up, I am very hungry, or was very hungry, to get some opportunities to go my way. And whenever those opportunities had come, I made sure that I took advantage of those opportunities. And so I went to Science High School. I went and was funded by government to go to the University of the Philippines. And when the opportunity came for a Fulbright scholarship that will allow me to go to the U.S., I competed and I was successful. And if a guy like me, who is one of those faceless little boy that you see in the corners of the streets in Manila, can make it, then just about everybody can. Just a lot of hard work and no shortcuts.
Yes. Dr. Abrajano, exactly what is your dissertation about? What was it about? And what was the importance of this dissertation?
Well, just to give you a little bit of context, when I went here, I was working with the Bureau of Mines and Geosciences in the Philippines. So I was involved in mineral exploration in the Philippines. So when it was time for me to conduct my dissertation, I elected to conduct research in Zambales, which is the western part of Luzon, looking at rocks and minerals that are present there. And the reason why it is important to study that at that time, in terms of my major interest, is to help us guide exploration for things like chromite, platinum, base metals like copper and gold. And so in order to understand where those minerals are located, you have to understand how the rocks formed and how they have been transformed by subsequent reaction. So my dissertation, which was funded by the National Science Foundation, actually, was meant to try and understand how the rocks in Zambales formed and how the minerals became localized where they are.
And I know you had to go home to the Philippines to conduct that study. And was it supported by the NSF also? And I understand from you, a mining company.
Yes, well, I would say every piece of work, in order to actually be successful, has to have multiple support. Financially, the National Science Foundation did provide the means for travel, for logistics, and all things that we need in there. But when I was there, I had the assistance of the Bureau of Mines, my previous colleagues from the Bureau of Mines and Geosciences. I had tremendous assistance from Akohe Mining Corporation, which I don't believe exists anymore, but they provided logistics, they provided access to the mine, and I worked with a lot of wonderful people there. It took us over a month to actually collect samples and do the study there.
What do you think about the status of the science education in schools and universities? You think there should be more of this and also involvement from the community as well?
Do you mean that in the U.S.?
Yes.
In the U.S., the U.S. is struggling. If you look at STEM education, science, technology education in the U.S., it has been slipping back into, I believe, not even in the top 10 in the world. And the same as well in the Philippines. I thought when I was there I was getting some really outstanding education, elementary and high school. But the world has gotten so competitive, and any system, any country that kind of falls asleep will be down in this competitive kind of environment. And so I believe that even those people who do not intend to become scientists will benefit from taking courses in physics, chemistry and math, and the geosciences. And I believe that the curriculum in the U.S. to be able to compete with other nations must emphasize STEM education.
You've done research, you have been a professor, and you also are with the government now. What do you want to do next?
Well, I am enjoying what I'm doing right now, and we are making some very important decisions on investment, on what the priority areas are in the geosciences. I have privately harbored a desire to retire early, probably at the age of 60. And my wife and I had always talked about going back to the Philippines when that happens. And by then I would be happy to sit and soak the suns and the wonderful people in our country and kind of get reacquainted. But if there are some opportunities that become available, be it in a university or in government or in the private sector, I probably would be interested in pursuing that.
And just before we get your message to all the people around the world, especially to that young scientist watching our public affairs program today, any very earth-shaking discoveries that NSF has made, or any wonderful news that you would like to share with our audience today? Like, people are not even aware, not too much, about global warming, perhaps the marine life going into the brink of extinction. And I didn't realize that gusty winds also exist in space, and so many other things. So these are, the things that Dr. Abrajano will share with you.
Yes, the geosciences in particular had been dealing with some very complex studies of climate, how the Earth has evolved over billions of years. And so over the years, what we have learned in these complex systems is that it has changed dramatically over time. And the changes that we are seeing now in terms of the global temperatures, atmospheric circulation, and so forth, are really unprecedented in the past hundreds of thousands of years. And it has become significantly believable that the reason for this change has to do with the way that we have altered the atmosphere of the planet, and that it behooves us to adapt to understanding what these changes mean. Here at the National Science Foundation, we have invested in tremendous amount of research that has allowed us to not only make the sort of global understanding of how climate is changing, but most importantly, for people who are making decisions, we have now zoned in on creating an understanding of the regional changes that are taking place in Southeast Asia, in the Midwest, in California, and so forth. And this kind of micro scale, this sort of regional understanding is what you need to understand what will happen to the precipitation, what will happen to the water supply, to the water balance. Important, immensely important for making economic and financial decisions in the country. And so in recent years, these are the major kind of breakthroughs that we have. We have models that will predict decadal to longer term changes in, for example, the water supply of California, kind of major economy in the planet. In the Midwest, the depletion of water in the Ogallala aquifer, which supplies the water that is needed for agriculture, that supplies the grain for most of the country. And understanding how coasts are getting inundated, kind of demanding some hard decisions to be made, for example, with the recent history of Sandy, on how the infrastructure like the subway and the roads and the houses that are located in the coastal zones, how do we adapt to all these changes?
We truly appreciate the time that you've given us, Dr. Abrajano Jr. from the National Science Foundation. And now, please bring your message to the world, especially to that young boy scientist or young girl scientist who is watching you.
Yeah, one of the things that I have always been very proud of is not really what it is that I was able to accomplish, but more so what I was able to accomplish against the odds of growing up in the slums of Quezon City and Manila, as it were, and how important it is to aspire for what it is that you want to do, regardless of what is in front of you. And I had always said that I could, for those of you who were spending your time in Manila during the time that I was growing up, I could have been one of those faceless children that you see running on the road, hanging by the back of the jeepney. And if that little boy is able to do what he has aspired to do, it really speaks to the opportunities that are out there for those who are willing to grab it. And that's my message for the youth of Quezon City and Manila.
Thank you so much. This has been Public Affairs, AWI TV. Till then,